Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, last week we talked about AC fundamentals on the garage, Ed, so it only makes sense to turn our attention to the AC cycle. And you know, only on Tech Garage we have the coolest demos on the planet, a full functioning AC system. You're going to love this one. But Josh, the cycle, where does it all start?
It all starts right here at the compressor. Now the compressor only deals with gas. So what goes into the compressor is a low pressure gas, and it comes out as a high pressure gas.
Cool, and then it sends it over to the condenser, which is located on the front of your car right here. This is the condenser, and that's actually taking that high pressure hot gas into it. And think about your mirror at the house. You know, when you actually take a shower and that's all a steam or a gas going down, and then it condenses and turns into a liquid? Well, that's what's happening here. It's going from a gas to a liquid, and we had to get it hot because we had to take that refrigerant, that heat, and boom, throw it off the car.
Right, it only goes from high heat to less heat. So we had to raise the pressure, raise the temperature, that way we could get it to the outside air.
Speaking of that, we move over to your next component. What's down the line?
After it leaves the condenser, it comes over to our restriction. In our case, we have a thermostatic expansion valve, or TXV for short.
Yeah, and you know, you can have a couple different types of systems. You can take a look at the graphic right there. We can have an orifice tube, and Josh, that's pretty cool. It's a fixed restriction. You got an analogy for that?
Yeah, the way I like to think of it is you have a water hose that you put a kink in. You have a high pressure on one side, it's kind of trickling out. You have a low pressure on the other side. The same thing's going on in our air conditioning system, but in our case, our restriction creates high pressure on one side, which is hot, and low pressure on the other side, which is cold, which is what we need to get to our evaporator.
Ooh, changing temperatures, exactly right. And we have our TXV right there. So you could have two types of systems. Now, we did that for a reason, because we wanted that refrigerant really, really cold, because we're coming into right here now, which in this area is called a evaporator. And that's about 32 degrees of that refrigerant. Why? Because the inside of the car is 70, 80 degrees. Refrigerant that actually heat's going to jump onto it right there on that evaporator, and it's going to take a ride, change states, mind you, from a liquid now back to a gas, and it's going to return to the compressor, and it's going to start all over again. But Josh, you got a couple of tips you can do. We can start at the compressor, and you can actually feel it when it's running. So it's coming out of that compressor, it should be hot, correct?
Right, so if pressure increases, temperature increases. Pressure decreases, temperature decreases. So
fire this thing up and let's see it actually work in action. This is pretty cool. So you can get it running, man. This is fully running AC system. Check this out. Now you should be able to feel those lines. You should feel a difference, right?
Right, so if your compressor's working like it should, you should have a hot coming out. And in our case, we do. High pressure gas equals hot gas.
Awesome, so it got it nice and hot, ran it over to the condenser, went in here hot, changed state. So we're gonna have a little temperature change here from going in to going out. Not too much, maybe 20 or so degrees. Then it goes to our big change. Let's explain that.
Right over here, back to our restriction, our TXV. You can see right here we have a hot liquid coming in here because it's a high pressure liquid. Then we have our restriction. Once it comes out, it changes to a cold liquid, all because of that pressure difference.
There it is. Then it takes that cold liquid over to the actual evaporator, and those lines, if I touch those lines, there's a little temperature difference because the heat's jumping on from the outside, and then it's running over here, and that's how it's actually running that AC system. So once again, that car's taking the heat from inside the cab and throwing it outside. Josh, shut it off for a minute. We actually got an email question. You guys need to send yours in to feedback@techgarage.com. This is Philip from Flagstaff, Arizona, man. Well, first of all, Philip, you better get out of Arizona. It's pretty hot. But he's got an Impala, Josh. It stops blowing cold once in a while. We call that an intermittent problem. He's not a tech, but you know, he's worked on cars, so maybe some tips, Josh, you can look for right off the bat.
Yeah, first thing I would do when it's not operating as it should, I would look at my compressor, see if the thing's engaged, see if it's even running.
So you guys need to stick with us, just like Philip, because we're going to have all the diagnostics you need to keep your air conditioning system in tip-top shape. In future episodes, we're going to talk about gauge readings and all the components. But right now, we got to take a short break, but don't go far because it's the Keep It or Crush It segment next. We'll be back with more Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com.